back to the Board of County Commissioners regular June 15th board meeting. We are reconvened, and Ms. Mokrasky will proceed with this afternoon's hybrid meeting, and I will mention that you'll see 4 county commissioners at the podium, and Commissioner Berney is with us virtually on the screen to our left, to the audience's right, and anyone at home can see Commissioner Berney. Welcome, Commissioner Berney.
Thank you.
So we'll move forward with the item 10A on our agenda, which is Order 22-06-21-13 in the matter of approving a contract with HDR Engineering Incorporated in the amount of $201,444 to complete a wastewater feasibility study for the unincorporated community of Blue River and delegating authority to the county commissioner to execute.
Commissioner Foss?
You know, I am on next.
I believe you're
I'm on next week. So join me next week, next Tuesday afternoon.
So, Chair, so my understanding is the clock is 3 minutes fast and you're 1 week fast.
I am way ahead of schedule here. We're in recess.
1 week and 3 minutes.
Let's press June 14th then. It is still 1:30 p.m. On Wednesday, June 15th. And welcome to our afternoon agenda, which begins with item 4A, Order 22-06-15-02, and still in the matter of approving, but this time a 3-year contract with WellPath LLC for medical, dental, and mental health services at Lane County Adult Corrections in the amount of $5,494,491 for the first year, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the contract. Today we have Ms. Mokrasky. I'll introduce our panel of Sheriff Harold. And Sheriff Harold, if you'd like to step forward to the podium. And typically I ask Mr. Mokrasky to introduce the panel, because typically it's Mr. Mokrasky's staff that is making the presentation, but today it is our elected sheriff. And Sheriff Harold, please.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. And I'm going to take just a tiny bit of time, and then I want to turn it over to Captain Riley and Greg Rice, who are the experts about this. But just a couple of quick comments. You've heard us speak for the last couple of years about WellPath in particular, because we've been working through a pandemic, and they've just been really terrific partners as our jail medical provider. And then also with respect to our mental health crisis and the work that we're doing in the jail, again, WellPath has been a tremendous partner, and they tell us frequently that we're real leaders, actually, as far as their customers go across the nation with respect to the things we're trying to accomplish there. But mostly I'm here to introduce it and to tell you that Captain Clint Riley has done a tremendous job in our relationship with WellPath. And in particular, with this contract, we all know that the cost of things is going up quite a bit at the moment. And Clint has really established a relationship with the leadership of WellPath that he's worked really hard prior to bringing this to the board to work on that dollar figure that you just read, to take care of the tax dollars that we have here in Lane County, while also continuing to provide the exceptional service, medical and mental health in the jail. So I wanted to be here to brag publicly on Captain Clint Riley and the work that he's done working on this contract. And with that, I'll turn it over to them so they can talk about details. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff Harold.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate the kind words. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm here with Lieutenant Greg Rice. I'm going to turn it over to him, let him do our presentation, and then we'll be available for questions. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners, for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today about our medical contract with WellPath. WellPath continues to be a valuable partner at the Lane County Jail. They have consistently demonstrated the willingness to adapt to changing needs and services based upon current best practices and at the request of the Sheriff's Office. With their assistance, the Sheriff's Office has been able to, over the years, implement new strategies and providing important care to the individuals in our facility. One example is the mental health program that you've heard us speak often about. On any given day, approximately 75% of our population has a history of mental health issues, while 22% has a severe or persistent mental illness. The mental health team here at the jail provides services to all of these individuals, whether it be one-on-one check-ins each day with individuals housed in our special management unit, or scheduled one-on-one check-ins with any individual that's housed throughout the facility, or providing more intensive services to those that have been identified to be part of our mental health program. Throughout the years, we have continued to grow the mental health program, and we are now serving 48 individuals with the goal to increase that to 96 participants in the coming years. The data shows that we must continue to invest in mental health services in our facility, and WellPath has been an outstanding partner in this area. A more recent example is the Medical Assisted Treatment, or MAT program. Our MAT program allows individuals who are currently involved in a community-based program to stay on their medications, while also providing an opportunity for individuals in our care to start on a MAT program. Any individual who is released from custody has been identified as wanting to engage in or was participating in the MAT program while in custody are provided a referral to a community MAT provider so they can continue to receive the help that they want and need. When we had the opportunity to apply for the grant to start the program, WellPath was immediately all in. They worked with us to ensure that we met the requirements of the grant and continue to be a vital partner in providing these services. WellPath has worked diligently to establish relationships with the community partners to ensure individuals in our community who wish to receive help are provided that opportunity. During the pandemic, WellPath has built strong relationships with Lane County Public Health. The partnerships between WellPath and Lane County Public Health and the Sheriff's Office has significantly impacted the way the Corrections Division has managed the pandemic. WellPath has provided COVID testing to over 8,800 AICs, has vaccinated over 500 AICs, and provided booster vaccines to over 160 AICs. WellPath staff has been vital to the success we have had in managing COVID in our facility. If you've had the opportunity to attend the quarterly meetings that Megan Quillen, WellPath's HSA for our facility, conducts, you would have seen that the vast majority of the individuals in our care require significant medical care. If you have not had the opportunity to attend, I invite you to attend the next one in July. Last quarter, WellPath staff passed out about 80,000 medications, saw over 1,500 individuals for medical sick calls, while also providing mental health appointments to over 1,700 individuals. Additionally, the mental health staff conducted 751 suicide watch assessments. During that quarter, a single snapshot was taken. And, once again, this demonstrates the consistency. About 75% of our population has a history of mental health. So on that snapshot, it just showed that we are continuing throughout the years of maintaining that 75% of our population has a mental health issue. The level of service and care and compassion provided to those in our custody that WellPath staff is providing is outstanding. WellPath continues to create and foster critical relationships with outside key partners, for instance, local hospitals, the Oregon State Hospital, and various departments within Lane County Health and Human Services. This is beneficial in providing continuity of care for individuals within the jail, as well as when they are released back into the community. For example, WellPath's mental health team has been vital to the training of the court liaison position that is part of FIT. The success that has been had with the court liaison position is in large part to WellPath's willingness to be part of the solution in tackling the crisis system shortfalls in our community. In addition to external collaborations and partnerships, WellPath has demonstrated a high degree of effectiveness at building and maintaining partnerships internally between Sheriff's Office staff and WellPath staff. Every week, members of WellPath's mental health team and Sheriff's Office personnel meet to discuss every AIC that is part of the mental health program on a suicide watch, housed in the special management unit, and any other AIC that there is concern about. In this meeting, conversations are had regarding AICs as security staff or mental health staff have brought forward for consideration to be part of the mental health program. When I was first part of these meetings 8 years ago, it wouldn't be uncommon for that meeting to last an hour. Now, this meeting lasts a minimum of 4 hours each week. It just shows the dedication and commitment WellPath has to making sure that the individuals in our care are provided for. WellPath has earned the confidence of the Sheriff's Office staff as a provider and partner in meeting AIC needs. With the strong relationships that have been built between WellPath, community partners, and the Sheriff's Office, we are requesting that the board approve the contract with WellPath. I really appreciate you guys giving us the time to talk about WellPath and our contract. And if you have any questions, I would take them at this time.
Lieutenant Rice, thank you very much. I'll look to the board for questions. And Mr. Mokrzycki, the action we're taking today will be to authorize your signature. So please, at any time you have additions to the conversation, you are absolutely, we're looking at you for the ultimate action on today's board action. So I'll open it up to questions from the board. Commissioner Bozovich.
So just real quick for the audience sake, what's an AIC?
Adult in custody.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Acronyms.
Adult in custody, correct? Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. The snapshot and numbers that you presented, are those available so the public can see those? I think those are really important numbers and that people would really benefit from learning and understanding better the services that we're delivering to our AICs, to our adults in custody.
Yeah. The actual snapshot data, I can get that to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Further discussion? I'm looking to Commissioner Burney on the screen. I see no hand raised. Then I'll mention this and I'll look at you, Sheriff Farrell, because I can look at the screen, but Lieutenant Rice doesn't know I'm looking right into his eyes right now. And Captain Riley doesn't know I'm looking at him. So I'll look at the Sheriff. Sheriff, you know, this contract is for medical, dental, and behavioral health. The entire discussion seems to be surrounding behavioral health. And I'd like to underscore the fact that, you know, most often when you and I talk, the subject turns to behavioral health with our AIC, with the population who are housed in the jail. So can you just give me a little briefing on why such emphasis on behavioral health? Now, Lieutenant Rice has already stated that as much as 75% of the population of the jail is suffering or has suffered or has a history of behavioral health. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, our state and I think our nation has been working through a mental health crisis for over a decade now. And hopefully we're moving in a direction of seeing some better resolution. But the reality is the institutionalization of folks struggling with mental health needed to be affected, and it was some years back, but it wasn't replaced adequately. And so what has happened is that the public safety system, law enforcement, jails have become sort of the last resource safety net for folks who are struggling with mental health issues that put them in a situation of not being able to function according to the rules of society. They cause 911 calls and disruption. And the support structures are not there to find ways to support them outside of the criminal justice system. So it's been something that's been headed in the wrong direction, actually, for a number of years, and not just in our jail, but across the state and the nation. Here in Lane County, of course, we're working on some alternate resolutions, a crisis stabilization center that both Captain Riley, Lieutenant Rice, and myself have been involved in just a lot of meetings about, and hoping to find that we can have folks removed from a situation where they're causing disruption and taken to a place that's therapeutic instead of the jail, where they can be stabilized and hopefully continuing a path of stabilization rather than a revolving door of removed from a situation to a location, released back out into the streets without supports, finding themselves yet again in that situation. So we definitely have plans to improve that situation. But the reality is today, the Lane County Jail is the resolution for most of those situations. And so we have invested mightily in trying to find new ways to do the work we do in that building to take care of the folks while they're in our custody. But the reality is we're not capable really of doing the long-term stabilization. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You came very, very close, and you touched on something that I will ask you briefly about, which is the planned stabilization crisis center. But surrounding that, Sheriff Harold, behavioral health has become a major issue for this board, for your department, and every third Thursday of the month we engage in a mental health summit. You've been a part of that as far back as I can remember, as was Tom Turner when he was sheriff. As was Byron Trapp when he was sheriff. Can you talk about the mental health summit ever so slightly? I consider it to be one of our main tools regarding the addressing the critical junction, the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. What about the mental health summit? What happens there?
Yeah, well, I'll say this, in the early years that I was involved with it, it had great involvement from obviously those of us in governmental service, behavioral health, and public safety, but also nonprofits and for-profit organizations that work in the mental health realm. and we were coming together monthly and really talking about the fact that we had a problem. What I appreciate most recently is that we're talking a lot more about a solution instead of repeating the problem. And so it's felt to me like we are gaining some momentum and headed in the right direction. And certainly the folks who are engaged on a monthly basis, and we're talking about Eugene Municipal Court judges and Springfield judges and prosecutors, and really just across the system coming together monthly to try and adjust the way as a community we're addressing the situation. So as I say, I'm encouraged because there is a sense of momentum now that once was lacking. So it's a great group of people that really want to find a solution, and I think we're finally headed in that direction.
And I will say that the Mental Health Summit, for me, in my mind, that's where the seeds of our frequent user system engagement program came from. That's where the seeds of a behavioral health, a crisis center / stabilization center came from. And I'd like to mention, Mr. Mokrycki, that Lane County Behavioral Health staff has been integral in organizing and conducting the Mental Health Summit. Dr. Joshi convenes the summit and is the runs the agenda. I'd like to really commend her for the work that she does, bringing all of these professionals who actually live and breathe the issues that Sheriff Harold is talking about. It happens every third Thursday, not tomorrow. We're canceled for tomorrow, but every third Thursday, and it really has been significant in helping identify ways to divert people from the emergency room, divert people from jail and into stabilization and treatment. Sheriff Harold, thank you very much. I'll go to the rest of the board for further questions, and I see Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I neglected to ask this before. Recently in the news has been some stories about the Supreme Court decision requiring private companies to ensure accommodation for folks in custody with disability, even though there is a law exempting custodial law enforcement and fumbling for the right words, but correctional facilities. So is there language in the contract? Is that just something that we trust will happen with WellPath? And if it doesn't, we'll address it. How are we ensuring that they're providing accommodation for people with disabilities?
But you can jump in here at any time, but I'll say the times that I've been engaged with the Oregon State Sheriff's Jail Command Council, we've discussed requirements for ADA accommodations. And I'm not aware of the exact you're speaking of, but are we talking about general accommodations for ADA, whether it be mobility or hearing or vision?
Exactly. I believe the case initially was around someone in custody with a hearing disability who wasn't accommodated with the communication they needed.
Yeah, and I'll say I wasn't aware that there was any exemption because the conversations have always been within the entire state. Command Council is about needing to accommodate those. In fact, we've had a debrief on a lawsuit in another county with respect to a hearing impaired individual, and even that just note writing isn't necessarily an appropriate accommodation. And so that training, I participated in that at least 5 years ago. So I think the state of Oregon Jail Command Council is probably really well versed and educated and aware of expectations with respect to that. So Clint, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can add a little more to that. Commissioner Trieger, we also at intake, when someone intakes into our facility, there's a nurse that does a medical screening and we ask about ADA accommodations. And if anybody has an ADA accommodation, there's a complete process they go through. And one of our deputies is actually the ADA coordinator, and it has a supervisor that oversees that with periodic check-in dates to make sure that we're meeting their accommodation. We've got an entire procedure put together on ADA, and WellPath works with us on that to accommodate those folks.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Trieger. Further questions? That being said, we do have, oh, I'm sorry. There you are, Bernie. Thank you.
That's okay, because I'm looking into the eyes of Captain Riley, and he can tell because we're both on Zoom. I have a question and then a comment, if I might. My question, Sheriff, you mentioned sort of in general terms that we've been sort of going in a wrong direction, and more jail beds have been taken up with people who have mental issues. And you're hopeful, and we're hopeful that now maybe we're going. How long has this been the case? How long have we sort of been going in that direction of changing really the demographics of our prison population?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It feels to me like probably at least 20 years. But I think that I wasn't paying as much attention to it 20 years ago in my career as I am now. So I don't know if I could answer real distinctly. I can tell you we recently did a retirement for one of our corrections staff, and he worked his career in the jail. And I think he'd been a 23-year deputy. And he shared with me that if we were still incarcerating the same folks that we were incarcerating 20 years ago, he would have stayed another 10 years. But it really was the fact that he felt like he was more working in a mental institution. It just had worn him out to the point where he didn't think he could do it anymore. So I think over time, probably the last 20 years, it's been moving that direction, but I don't know. I should know the history a little bit.
No, I didn't mean to. I appreciate that. It's been so long. It's almost been at a minimum. I hear you saying it's been at a minimum 1 generation, perhaps even 2. I saw in the news last night the same kind of issue from educators dealing with how are they going to protect children in their classrooms as some of these phenomena are occurring, which ironically kind of started at Thurston High School. And they're burning out. And what they're saying, I hear, and this comment is to Captain Riley, who, by the way, I've gotten to know a little bit and have gained so much respect for. I won't even belabor that. But I do want to say that it feels like law enforcement and detainment professionals are being asked to do things they're not trained for, given the nature of our population that they're working with, hence this type of contract. And I just want to point out that that Captain Riley has really impressed me with the fact, I share this with other commissioners, that here is a person that's always looking at how do you say yes, that's always looking at how do you de-escalate and turn a problem into an opportunity. And I think that this contract and the kinds of behavioral health and other services, by the way, my dentist is one of the dentists every Monday, he's in the jail, is really to be commended. So I commend you, Captain, and I'm through, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Further questions or discussion? I'm diligently looking around. Then we have before us order 220615-02. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
In the clamor for motion and second, Commissioner Buck has made the motion for 220615-02, seconded by Commissioner Burney. Discussion to the motion, and Mr. Mokrasi, I'll look at you. Is there anything you'd like to add prior to our voting on this motion?
I would just say I think it's to me fascinating to see the evolution of this contract. I've been here now. I think this is the 3rd time that we've reviewed and the board has reviewed and approved this contract, and how the discussion has shifted from primarily focusing on the medical side to now primarily focusing on the mental health side. And so I think this is a great reflection of where the gap continues to exist, and that Lane County has and continues to push for a solution. I want to just recall a story, if I may, that when Sheriff Harold was still chief deputy and maybe soon to be acting sheriff and ultimately sheriff, we were going through a budget process. And I remember the meeting that I had with the sheriff's office. I think it was then Chief Deputy Harold. And I asked, if you had $1 million to invest, what would you do? An additional $1 million, what would you do? And Sheriff Harold said at the time, we need a behavioral crisis center. There's no place for folks with these mental health issues. They're cycling through the jail. The jail's not the right place. That answer then led to us proposing $1 million in the budget. I think it was 3 years ago, to seed the sort of early phases of this facility. The board has subsequently allocated $7 million in ARPA funds to advance that work. We've done a lot of work, and I just want, the sheriff's office has been the leading law enforcement agency on filling that gap. And we need not only the support, but the advocacy of the other law enforcement agencies in our community, particularly EPD, that brings many of these folks to the jail. And so, we're on that road. And I think this contract articulates the great need that we have to find a better solution than the jail to serve many of the individuals that are currently there.
Thank you, Ms. Mulcahy. I remember the day that you told me about that $1 million in the budget 3 years ago, was it? And I thought, what a great first step. It wasn't the first step, but the first real stride down the road. So Sheriff Harold, thank you very much. We'll take the vote now. Without further discussion, Commissioner Bozievich.
I just want to take a moment to remember maybe some of the history of this a little bit, because it was kind of fascinating to watch people clamor to move and second the motion. I'm sure this is going to pass unanimously. But due to our severe budget issues back in 2011, we started looking at contracting medical services for the jail. And we approved that first contract on a 3-2 vote. It was highly controversial at the time. And, you know, it was the beginning of contracting. And it wasn't with the best contractor at the time, and we ended up getting rid of that contractor and finding a new one. But the fact that we were contracting this service allowed us the flexibility to change on the fly. You know, we did things like start bringing in mental health professionals right into the jail with WellPath. You know, it's something that we were able to do pretty easily. And, you know, I think the growth of the number of people with diagnosed or histories of mental health in the jail partly is our recognition of the fact that a lot of criminal behavior is driven by mental health issues over time. You know, so we're looking for it. I imagine if you went back and took a snapshot 50 years ago and did proper diagnosis of adults in custody, you probably find a pretty high percentage of mental health issues in that population. We just didn't do it. You know, that was the history somewhat. But in addition, there's been other drivers. You know, I've been married 40 years now. Meth was not a big issue when I got married. And we've now had several generations of people addicted to meth. How much that is impacting our mental health crisis. How much is high THC cannabis? I mean, the cannabis THC levels when I was young enough to have inhaled are absolutely different from what they are today. And how much is that driving mental health issues as people under 25 that are still developing their brains are changing brain patterns with THC? You know, there's a lot of different drivers out there. And we, unfortunately, our jails and correctional facilities are overwhelmed with this problem. I'm just really fortunate and feel very fortunate we found such a great partner, and the jail has, with WellPath. And I am looking forward to voting yes on this contract renewal.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And that all of that led to the successful passage of the first sheriff's levy, which included behavioral health staff specifically for the jail. Commissioner Burney.
Two things, but first, I noticed Captain Riley had been trying to say something and you hadn't noticed. Is it okay to recognize him before you recognize me?
It is, and I will say that all we have is a silhouette of you, Captain Riley. I think
I know my office is so dark here. I'm like sitting over here in the dark side. I just wanted to point out one thing. We've been talking a lot about mental health, and also we need to throw in substance abuse disorders and addictions that we see in the jail. So our medical contract, not only mental health, but also the people that we're seeing coming in here that are withdrawing from drugs and alcohol, and the level of medical care it takes to, particularly alcohol, as someone's going through alcohol withdrawals in jail. And WellPath does a great job, but they also have a lot of staff that take care of those folks that come in and out. And then we hear about co-occurring disorders, those that have both substance abuse and mental health disorders. So I just wanted to throw that out there as like they're doing the mental health, and there's also that piece that's still going on too. Thank you, Commissioner Burney.
Oh, no, thank you. In fact, this is going to sound choreographed, Chair, but I honestly didn't know what the captain was going to say. I was going to say that so many things have changed in our society, such as what the captain just mentioned, that I was going to say I don't think we have time, but I'm not so sure that substance abuse and behavioral health 40 years ago, if properly diagnosed, would have led to the same kind of things we're seeing right now. And I'm speaking as someone who's the grandson of a bootlegger during the Prohibition from Erie, Pennsylvania, who landed in jail in the 4th grade. And so I think that things were just so fundamentally different, but I'm delighted to vote yes on this, and I won't belabor the conversation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Birdie, and thank you, Captain Riley. Any further discussion? I'm going to let that go twice. Any further discussion? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Sheriff Harold, thank you so much. Thank you, Lieutenant Rice. Thank you, Captain Riley. And thank you, Commissioners, for this excellent action.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
All right. And we'll,
Yeah.
what's the date today again? Thank you. Then we'll move along to item 5A on our agenda, which is moving to Public Works, Order 22-06, 15-03, in the matter of amending the Land Management Division fee schedule effective August 1st, 2022. Mr. Mokrayski, I'll look to you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Chair. We have Keir Miller here, our Land Management Division Manager. This is an item that has previously, and Keir will talk about this, previously gone to the Finance and Audit Committee. There's been a lot of discussion and through the budget process with the Budget Committee about the structural imbalance that we have in the Land Management Fund that is heavily reliant on, almost completely reliant on fees to operate, which is unique in Oregon, that we are so heavily reliant. Thanks to the actions of the Budget Committee this year, for next fiscal year, we do have some funds that were made available through the Video Lottery Fund. And so staff has taken that back and reworked the fee schedule. And so you'll hear an update from Mr. Miller here about that what that will look like. But a good portion of this really is to address the adjustments that have not occurred over the last several years through the pandemic, the sort of general cost of living adjustments to our fee schedules that we have delayed because of the other challenges that we've seen in our community and state. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Miller to walk you through.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Good afternoon, Chair and Board. So just a quick bit of background. Land Management Division has been primarily an enterprise fund since 2002. Prior to that, the division relied heavily on the general fund for support for our services. Since 2002, we've gone through cycles where our fees have not kept pace with the cost of service. We have had periodic updates in our fee schedule over time to increase fees to try to keep pace with rising costs. We also have had some limited help from Video Lottery that funded a position within the division. We also received some funding through the Waste Management Division tipping fees. But as Steve mentioned, for the most part, our budget is heavily reliant on user fees for services. And this, of course, helps the county. There's very limited general fund dollars that can be allocated to different programs, as you all know. Land management is in the division or in the position where we can charge fees for our services. It's not unheard of. Other counties and jurisdictions across Oregon do this. The one thing I will mention, though, is as far as I'm aware, we are the only jurisdiction in the state of Oregon that does not rely upon some general fund dollars. So we're in an interesting position. We had been being pretty cautious for a number of years because we've had some significant layoffs in Land Management Division, particularly in 2009 when we had to lay off about 22 positions within the division. That was roughly half of our staffing at the time. And that was because of just this chronic, underfunding. And in addition, that was when the economy took a big hit. So we were in a position then of trying to slowly rebuild staff. And that, of course, is a challenge once you lay off all of these professional and talented staff to rebuild in time. And that has impacts on the economic recovery because we don't have staff in place to be able to process permits quickly, and it has impacts. So as a result, the division has spent the last several years carefully building reserves. I will say this has costs, though. We've carefully built reserves, but we haven't been optimally staffed. And as a result, our permit processing timelines aren't as fast as we would like them to be or they could be. But the benefit is that when we find ourselves in a position like we are now, we have healthy reserves that we can rely on to bridge over the next few years. And the reason we are primarily in this situation, rising costs, we've gone through budget negotiations. The majority of our staff have received COLAs, well-deserved COLAs, as well as market adjustments to make sure they're being paid appropriately. We've also, as the board is aware, waived permit fees for Holiday Farm Fire residents, which I'll speak about that in a minute. Luckily, those funding for that has been offset to some extent. And then we've added a number of staff over the last couple of years to respond to the Holiday Farm Fire. So we're in a position where prior to recent allocations by the budget committee and ARPA dollars, we were looking at a $2.8 million shortfall for the next fiscal year, which was going to come directly out of our reserves. As Steve mentioned, we went to the Finance and Audit Committee with this sort of dire prediction and proposed a range of options for a fee increase to help offset that. The range of options included a 10% all the way up to a 40% across the board fee increase, which obviously we knew that that's not a popular thing to do ever. And we had a feeling that was going to really trigger the discussion, which it did. And we're thankful for that. As a result, the board's really done a number of efforts to try to help the budget situation in the Land Management Division, starting with allocating $1.5 million in ARPA funds, and that funding is used primarily to offset the fee waivers that we provided Holiday Farm Fire victims. And then the Budget Committee, Commissioners Bozovich and Trieger and the Budget Committee supported the use of video lottery dollars, $650,000 for next year's budget and video lottery. So between those two items, our financial situation, while not great, we'll still be tapping into reserves is much better. And at this point, what we've done is we've adjusted our fee increase proposal, really to keep in line with the growing costs. We've seen a lot of increase in the cost of living. Obviously, things are more expensive and staffing is more expensive. The last time we went and raised fees was back in 2019. And at that time, the Finance and Audit Committee instructed Land Management Division to get on an annual or semi-annual consumer price index-based fee increase that helps residents, because we're not making dramatic increases in fees and we can do small incremental adjustments over the years. So again, as Steve mentioned, because of the impacts of the economy from the COVID and the fire, we forego pursuing those incremental adjustments over the last couple of years, but now we're proposing a cumulative CPI-based increase of 9.1%, which would get back in line with where we were headed. It still doesn't address the larger structural imbalance that's within the Land Management Division. That's something that I want to continue to look at, but there are other that's sort of an option of last resort, increasing fees. I want to look at all other available options for finding revenue for the division. But as a component of that, the division will be undertaking a comprehensive fee analysis and a process analysis over the next year to determine, what is the correct level of funding needed for each fee type. Some fees we know are recouping maybe 60% of full costs for processing those application types, while others might be closer to 100. And rather than an across-the-board fee increase, I'd like to have it more targeted and systematic. So at this time, staff is recommending that the board approve the attached order, which would increase Land Management Division fees by 9.1%. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. I'll look to the board for questions. And I'm seeing none at this point in time. I'm sorry, Commissioner Buck, I'll look directly past you.
See who.
Commissioner Buck.
I don't have any questions, only because both Commissioner Farr and myself are on the Finance and Audit Committee. And so we had a chance to look at this when the fee proposals were up to 40%. And at that time, I'm sure we both did like a big gulp, and nobody wants to raise the cost of building right now, especially when we need it so badly. and at that time, it was really important that we have the full board's input because we knew that there was a severe deficit. And we needed to pretty much have a come to Jesus moment about how we're going to fund this department because it was so out of line with the income that we were receiving. I'm very pleased that we were able to do two big, large chunks of funding for the program, and that what is being presented here today is far less than what was presented earlier to the Finance and Audit Committee. I still understand that even if we choose to do this increase today, that there is still an imbalance in the budget for your department. And very curious as to what additional ideas are out there, and maybe we don't have them yet. But if we know of anything now, I'd love to hear it, because people out there are also going to be, displeased about having higher fees, and they're already considered quite high for some folks. And I also just want reassurance that even if we decide to increase these fees today, that the waivers still exist for those in the Holiday Farm Fire area and will continue to exist for some time.
Sure, I could respond to both of those questions. Regarding the first, as I mentioned, we're looking at a range of potential options, including, federal funding, the community development block grant options. We're also looking carefully at the actual needs as Holiday Farm Fire permitting an activity is tapering off in certain areas. We may have opportunities to hold open vacant positions as those occur to have some cost savings if the staffing for the couple of positions may not be necessary in the long run. But we do expect that those positions will be needed over at least the next couple of years because recovery at this point is only about 45%. And that leads into your next question that absolutely the fee waiver program was adopted by the board to last for 5 years. So September 2025 is when it would sunset.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Follow up? Nope. Then Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I fully appreciate the fact that we've moderated these in part with the ARPA money and part with the video lottery money. Little kind of a question. A lot of our fees, particularly in the planning side, are just based on an action. If you're asking for this sort of planning action, there's this set fee. But on our building side, there's fees that are based on percentage of value. And understanding the value of housing in the last 10 years in this market has gone up over 100%. That percentage is of a increasing percentage, and we're now going to also increase those percentages. So on the building permit side, where percentage of value is part of it, has that been as big an issue deficit wise, or is this I'm kind of trying to ask because there's a natural increase that's happening when it's a percent of value. And then there's the other fees, set fees like a sanitation permit or a legal lot verification, where that doesn't have anything to do with it. Is part of our system kind of self-balancing and not in as big a trouble or
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely we see a bigger imbalance on the planning fees than the building fees. The building fees really don't keep in perfect sync with the true costs and increases in valuation. Those numbers, my understanding, are periodically updated by the Oregon Building Codes Division. So they will periodically update those charts and the valuation charts that our building division relies upon. But my sense is those don't keep track with this rapid increase in property values.
Yeah, and it's only the structural portion of the building they're valuing, not the land, which is part of what's been exploding.
Right. That's
all
correct.
this. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there so some of the people will think, oh, yes, housing's gone up and this building fee, you're going to go from 2.2 to 2.43%. It's like, why? The values are going up faster than that. It's just the structural portion of it. And it's based on a table provided by the state that probably lags by 6 months to a year, the actual real value of what construction costs. So just wanted to bring that out there. So I appreciate the answer.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich, and thank you, Ms. Miller. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm glad Commissioner Bozievich went first because I was thinking along those lines and couldn't figure out how to ask that question. So because that was going to be my first question, something along those lines. For my benefit also, just to catch me up as the newest member and not having the increase in tipping fees, was that in 2019? You mentioned some modifications in 2019 and you mentioned increase in tipping fees, and I wasn't sure if that's when that happened.
No, the last fee adjustment for the land management division fees approved by Finance and Audit was in 2019. The tipping fee adjustment actually started, I want to say back maybe 2011 or 2012, and that was after, LMD had those major layoffs.
Got it. So that sort of leads to the next, so that was to backfill. So this 9.1% increase, does that represent sort of catching us up in some of this lost time, or is it a reflection of the increasing cost of doing business now, or is it a combination?
It's really, I mean, the way we came to that number, that's just a cumulative, the sum of the CPI since our last adjustment. So really it's intended to just kind of keep us on track. It doesn't make up for that previous structural imbalance.
Great. So it's a way to keep us the same amount of behind instead of falling further behind.
Essentially.
Until we figure something out. So that leads me to my final question about the figuring something out. You mentioned doing a fee analysis, and are you doing that internally as a division? Are we contracting that service out?
We will likely contract that service out. That's what we've done in the past. We've gotten some pretty thorough analysis, but it's been 7 years since we've done an analysis like that.
Great. That was going to be my next question, is when's the last time we did that? So great. So I assume if that's a contract, that'll come to us at some point, just to understand what that involves and what the timeline for that looks like.
Sure. We can give the board an update on timing for that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. That relieves my question. Any further discussion or questions? I'm seeing none. So we have before us Order 220615-03 in the matter of amending the Land Management Division fee schedule. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich and seconded by Vice Chair Trieger. Motion order number 220615-03. Any discussion to the motion? I'm seeing none, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes unanimously, 5-0. Mr. Miller, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move along to item number 6A already. My gosh, how time flies. This is a human resource, and your panel is in the process of assembling, and I see that we'll be doing this virtually with Director Holmes and Mr. Mokrajewski. We'll be considering this is a discussion in the matter of recruiting for the county council position. Mr. Mokrajewski, will you introduce your panel, please?
Thank you, Chair. Our Human Resources Director, Alana Holmes, is here to lead the discussion. So Alana, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. With me today is Ryan McBride, Talent Manager, and Eliza Kaczynski, our new Classification and Compensation Analyst, in the event that you may have questions related to their work in this project as well. So they're listening in just in case they need to participate. So we're here with you today to discuss and receive feedback from the board regarding the recruitment of the county council position. As you will recall, our current county council's contract will expire on December 30th, 2022. We have used this date to plan our next steps regarding a recruitment for the position, which should hopefully result in a 30 to 60 day overlap to ensure a smooth transition. In order to do that, here's what I am seeking from you today. A green light to contract with a recruitment firm, approval to update the classification and job posting for the recruitment, agreement on the general proposed timeline, which is outlined in your memo, Also agreement with the recommended salary range for the position that I will share with you. And of course, if the board would like to see a different process, I'm absolutely happy to explore that with you today as well. As I know you are all very aware, talent acquisition in general is extremely difficult right now, and it has been for the last 2 years, but definitely has gotten more challenging. This trend holds true for all positions and sectors, and we expect the recruitment for this position to be no exception. It is a candidate's market right now, which places more burden on the employer to be able to attract and engage candidates throughout the search process in order to be competitive. This is also a particularly narrow field, and we anticipate that it will be challenging to find qualified candidates for this very unique role. For all of these reasons, we have begun the process of conducting a competitive search to identify and contract with an appropriate search firm that will be able to assist Lane County with sourcing and screening candidates for the county council position. I have included a potential timeline in your packet and look forward to your feedback as to the dates that are proposed. Our plan is to have a recruitment firm selected and a contract completed by the end of this month if possible. And the fee for utilizing a search firm is typically anywhere from 25% to 35% of the estimated first year of compensation for the candidate that is hired. If there is agreement, once a search firm is selected, HR will work with the firm to develop a job posting and begin sourcing candidates as soon as possible in July. We expect the firm we contract with to reach out to board members and other critical stakeholders to help understand the needs for the position and the office as the recruitment unfolds. So of note, in all of our comparator counties, the county council serves both as the lead of the county council office, as well as chief litigator for the county. And the salary range that I will discuss assumes that would be the case with the model that we have in place now. However, when a position is being posted, we always talk about it's a great time to reflect on the work that's been done, the work needed going forward, and whether there are any changes that need to be made to the job duties as we go out for recruitment. So I will definitely be interested in your thoughts on that as well, and that will help guide some of our conversations with recruitment firms. So for the majority of the past decade, the county council position has not had a salary grade assigned to it. Instead, there is a contract, an employment agreement with county council and a salary attached to that. 3 of our 5 comparator counties also determine their county council salary that same way. So instead of determining a salary grade for the county council, the focus was on identifying a range of salary for use in the hiring process. So what we would put in the job ad and what would be the range for the salary offer. Where the individual candidate falls within the range would be dependent on their background and experience, and the specific salary would be included in the contract negotiated. We would also include that the county council would receive COLAs on the same schedule as non-represented employees and identify an amount for merit increases in the contract if we go in that direction. At this point, our recommendation for competitive salary range for the county council position would be from $165,000 to $210,000 on an annual basis. This range was determined by comparing total compensation with our comparator counties and matching that market as closely as possible. The low of the range matches the average low end of the comparator ranges, and then the high end matches the average high end of the comparator ranges. So that was how we determined this range. And just a reminder that this position will also come with other compensation factors to include, for example, 2% of county council's salary paid into a deferred comp account, a vehicle and phone stipend, as well as other benefits, health insurance, wellness, et cetera, in the organization. If the board agrees and so directs, HR will return in the coming weeks with a board order for consent calendar to approve this compensation range for the county council position. So HR anticipates coordinating interviews in the late August to early September range with the goal of having an offer made to a candidate no later than October and a start date of late November to early December. HR will return to the board at a later date with a more detailed outline of a potential interview process for the board's consideration, feedback, and approval. So to conclude, I am asking the board to authorize me to select and contract with a recruitment firm, update the classification, create a job posting, agree on a general timeline for this process, and include the salary range as recommended today, with an understanding that a board order will be submitted at the next available consent calendar to document that compensation decision. As we get closer to the interview process, I will schedule time with the board to discuss proposed steps. I also could appreciate there may, from our end, the ability to be nimble and flexible to move through a process to meet the timelines if those are agreed to, and will be interested in hearing from the board their interest in how that relationship and communication and, if, for lack of better words, liaison work with the board through this process, what that could look like from your perspective. So Chair, this concludes the presentation portion of our agenda item, and we look forward to discussion and feedback from the board on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. And I'm going to open it for questions and discussion. Just prior to doing that, I'm going to reiterate, I believe, the 4 points that you'd suggested. One is you'd like us to authorize you to contract with a search firm. The second is to look at the job classification and create a posting. Third is to approve the timeline as outlined. And the fourth is to look at the salary range. That capture everything. So as we move forward with the discussion, we'll talk about that in general, but toward the end of the discussion, we'll make certain that we do cover all your points, Ms. Holmes. So we'll begin the discussion, and I'll look for I see, oh, that's a little tiny hand on the right-hand side. It's so dainty looking.
That's not his.
I don't think that is your hand, is it? Is your hand up, Joe? No, I didn't think so.
Weird.
That, you know what, that's somebody's cursor right there. So I'll open it up to the board for discussion. Nobody's clamoring for the mic at this point. Clamoring, and I'm gonna.
I'll get this started.
Okay, I'll begin with Commissioner Bozievich and Ms. Holmes. If we don't address it before, when I speak, we'll talk about the liaison work, the nimbleness that you talked about at the very end, beyond the 4 points that we're going to be discussing. So we'll start with Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So the first thing I want to say is go forth with finding a search firm as soon as possible. We should have probably started this sooner. Just so on number one, go. Number two, I want to kind of make sure that the board has this in consideration. And Alana, as you talk to search firms, our current county council's operating as 2 FTE. And we have to recognize that in recruitment, that we are looking for a county counsel who is basically the managing attorney of a small law firm. Our current county counsel operates as a managing attorney and a litigator. And I don't think we can expect to have a litigator in combination with county counsel. Again, it's unheard of and rare. And I think and that's one of the reasons why I'm in a hurry to get search firm here, because the new county council should be hiring that litigator position. But we are probably going to see an additional FTE in county council. Just to understand that dynamic is there. Then as we move on with process, I want to recommend that we have our county administrator sitting in on interviews and providing the board with his thoughts on candidates, because he is also our employee and will have to work closely with this employee that we hire directly from the board, and his input, I think, is valuable. At the same time, I'm going to offer a controversial recommendation, which is to have David Lovell, Dawn Leslie, and Ryan Senega all in those interviews, and knowing that they don't have a vote, but we should get their input as possibly being part of the 5 that is going to be managing this person in the years to come. You know, I'll be there, you know, looking at this position, and we'll have a vote on selecting that position. But after December, I will no longer be that person's boss. And we're down to 3 people that 2 of those 3 are definitively going to be here next year. And I think it, as a courtesy, if we can get them involved in the interview process and at least hear their input, knowing they won't have a vote, I think would be valuable for the board to consider in choosing candidates. Just as important as us hearing what our county administrator's opinions are.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Do you have a response to that, Ms. Holmes? I would not require or expect that, but.
Chair Farr, at this point, I appreciate the reflection. And as I'm looking back through these, I do agree, especially with respect to number 2, the comment about what the county council position will be doing as someone new comes on board, and the reflection on if there should be a carve out for those litigation duties. I'll be interested in hearing the rest of the conversation on that. I know that has been lifted up a little bit in the past as an acknowledgement of that workload that increases county Council Dingell's work. And I'm interested in hearing the exploration, and certainly depending on where that lands, we may have more feedback for you, including if there's anything to consider around the compensation, since I believe our other comparators, our other county comparators have this rolled up as a duty for this position. And I'm not sure it would impact anything, but I would just want our classification and compensation expert to take a look at that before we finalized anything. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. I'll open it up for further discussion. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would concur with the first 2 items that Commissioner Bozovich mentioned. I'm, rolling through my brain on the third issue, which is bringing in people that don't necessarily have the jurisdiction or the authority, at least at this point, to be in interview processes for anybody in the county. And it comes across initially as inappropriate. I understand why that was presented. But at this point, none of those people are yet formally in our positions. And it just feels inappropriate. I'm interested in what other commissioners have to say about it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Holmes, for the presentation. I guess my overarching question before I offer a particular opinion or feedback on what's been said so far, anything else I might, is how much of these kind of questions do you need answers to move forward? In other words, if the very next step is about securing a search firm, and then the classification posting and so on, which I understand that the piece about the duties, litigation components in particular, maybe are necessary in crafting the posting, but who is reviewing applicants or part of an interview process, or what that looks like? Is that something you actually need in order to move forward today? Is sort of a 1A question.
Chair and Vice Chair Trieger, I think that's a really great question. And with respect to components related to what I'll call the interview process, once the candidates have been selected and identified as folks we would recommend be considered for the position, we don't need to today to determine all of those components. Actually, I would plan this summer to come back and have further conversation with the board about, digging into the frameworks. We usually have some really good, robust processes for our high level and executive types of positions here, and then tailoring those to the interests of the board and with recommendations of what we think will, provide you with robust information to make a good decision.
Thank you. That's helpful because, I need to give more thought to that. Not only a yes or no to whether I think it's appropriate or a good idea or useful or valuable or whatever you want to say about potential incoming commissioners, but any other partners really. And I would want to hear maybe from the recruitment firm who's done this and is a more objective contributor to helping us shape the process and who inputs to it and at what point and how that input is weighted. I think I would welcome advice on that, regardless of whether this notion was brought up here today. So I will just say overall, I agree. I think we are a little behind the 8 ball timing wise already. So anything we can do to expedite the process is appreciated. And, let the pros do the work, let the recruiters do the work as quickly as possible. Regarding the actual nature of the work and workload, I think it's my understanding, as best I recall, litigation services were not always done in-house. We did at one time have a model where there was a chief county counsel running the council's office and contracted litigation services. And I know over time it's been discussed about bringing those in-house, which we've done as a cost savings and because we had a person who had that skill. So, it's been done both ways. And I think it does somewhat change the nature of the culture of an office when the person running the firm as well as litigating is all in one. So there's pros and cons. So if there's any way a recruiter can write a description that leaves room to get the best candidate based on various scenarios around whether those duties are included or not would be ideal for us, would give us the largest pool of applicants to look at if that's practicable. And I guess going back to the issue of who has input into the process, this is a really different position than our administrator, but I did really appreciate when County Administrator Mokrahajski joined us. Before that, I was a community member and on the budget committee, and we had some community-wide sessions to sort of input to what we were looking for and meet and greets and so on. So it's a very different position, and I don't think it quite requires or is appropriate to have that level of broad open community process, but I'm intrigued by the idea of a process that's a little more expansive than the 5 sitting commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Krieger. Commissioner Burney.
Yes, I don't know what the hand looked like before, but that's my hand.
That is very robust.
First of all, allow me to be the 3rd commissioner that says, hurry up. And this is not an issue for me, but I don't know why we've waited until now to start the process of identifying a firm to do this. It seems to me that when the board made the decision of a final year contract for our current general counsel, I don't know why that didn't trigger. I mean, we knew this had to happen. So I feel a little behind the 8 ball on that one. To quote Vice Chair Trieger, as it relates, all I see here really is request for approval of sort of a process and a time frame. I have no issue other than a late start with everything that's laid out here in terms of process and time frame. My interest is more, and Commissioner Bozievich, I don't think that was a controversial thing. I know you like controversy sometimes. I think that was a proposal, and I'm going to say I don't agree with that proposal. I do think that those commissioners that have been sitting, that made a decision that this is a direction we needed to go, ought to be doing the interviewing. I agree with Vice Chair Trieger. There ought to be some interested other parties. I'll give you a for instance. For instance, speaking personally, while I have been a sitting commissioner, there's been one group that I've heard that's been most critical of our current county council, and they have all sorts of ideas about what we should be looking for. Now, I'm not saying that they're necessarily right, but I think sometimes opinion, especially if it's minority opinion, is often the most important opinion, at least to consider in a democracy, and that's the AFSCME bargaining unit. And so I don't think it would hurt to have different parts of the organization participate in appropriate ways that I'd love you to propose to us, but participate in the thinking of what we want in a general counsel, attributes, qualities, et cetera, in addition to skills, and being in some way involved peripherally in the interview process, however you think is appropriate. So I'm agreeing with the notion of a little broader based process. I'm disagreeing with one of the commissioners that suggested who ought to participate in that, but I am agreeing that it ought to be a little broader based. And that's my input for you if it's worth anything.
Thank you, Commissioner Berney. Then I'll take a turn with my thoughts on this. You know, first thing I'm going to say, Ms. Holmes, is that not to defend you, but to look at the process that I've witnessed you go through. I don't think you're beginning your search for a search firm right now. I think you're well on your way. It's just a matter of determining which one to use. Am I accurate in that?
Chair,
So we're not
yes, you are.
as far behind the 8 ball, so to speak, as it might appear, because we do already have much of that work regarding selecting the search firm. So I believe that's in place. It's just a matter of narrowing it down to which 1 or 2 you want to finally consider. And then the second is regarding the contract. It sounds like you have universal approval from the board that move directly ahead as quickly as you can. The job classification, as far as developing the posting, I'm not sure how much more you need from us today on that. I believe that we're not sure as to whether or not we can recruit a counselor who is going to both be a firm manager and a litigating attorney. Maybe we can, maybe we cannot, but really, I don't know how we actually take a look at the classification without further discussion on that, or without a recommendation from you, or maybe as you said, a range of recommendations how that classification can look. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from you on that, on what that the job reclassification may involve. Now I'm going to get to the timeline. Boy, that is aggressive. Even though I know you are well along your way regarding selecting a firm, it's pretty aggressive to think that all of this can happen between now and December of 2022. And a part of that is because we do, as a commission, we do take time off. For instance, after next week, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks. Now that 2 weeks, I think, is going to be critical in the timeline, in meeting the timeline for the end of this year. So you had mentioned, how do we grant you the latitude to make decisions that don't require board majority approval as we move forward? With this, you know, what decisions can we give to you that don't require coming back to the board for absolute approval? And is there a way to communicate the decisions or the questions that you have to the board without convening the entire board? So then let's go back to the job itself. I don't know that there's a person out there that can do this job, quite frankly. I think there are a lot of people who can do elements of the job, but we're witnessing across the board a difficulty bringing people to Lane County from the outside, particularly in professional jobs, because, for one, they cannot find a place to live here. That really is a deterrent to a lot of people. Why would I move from pick a city to Lane County to not be able to find a place to live? And I think that's going to be a greater obstacle, maybe even than we anticipate, as we start looking to the outside for talent to fill the position that's been handled so admirably by Mr. Dingle. So that being said, the December timeline, we may find that that's impossible because we don't have the range of candidates that we'd love to see for this job. And I'm wondering how we have a contingency in place should we not meet the December timeline. What happens when we get to September, October, November, and there is nobody in place who really is going to do the job? Because we can't settle for somebody. You know, we're not in the business of settling for somebody who's going to do an okay job. We're looking for somebody to step in and do the kind of job that we expect and anticipate from this position. So I'm not really answering any questions at this point, Ms. Holmes, but I'm just throwing them out as possibilities to make this timeline you've given to us difficult to achieve. And not because we're starting in June. I don't think we're starting in June. I think you've been thinking about this since November, December of last year. So I believe that while we haven't paid much attention to it, our Mr. Mokaraisi, I believe our Human Resource Department has been paying a great deal of attention to this. So Ms. Holmes, what do you think about that? What do you think about the timeline? What happens if we begin to falter in that timeline?
Chair, thank you for that question. I think we need to have some other options available for your consideration. Maybe not decided upon today, but just knowing that we may have to visit those. We've been really fortunate of late to have several prominent recruitments where we've been able to land candidates for a variety of reasons, but we also know with the market out there, there are no guarantees. So currently, as I mentioned in my open, County Council Dingell's contract expires on December 30th, 2022. So one option is pursuant to his contract, and of course, this isn't a one-sided decision, would be to explore an extension if we don't have someone else in place. And again, that would involve other conversations. Another option would be if, do you look internally for someone to AIC in that role as a bridge to fill that position? And would anybody be interested in that? So there might be a couple of things to explore there. Not that we have to decide that today, but at least for folks to be thinking about. And then if I may, just a response back to Commissioner Berney, I certainly appreciate that feeling of, and also from Vice Chair Trieger, of being behind the 8 ball. And just sharing with you some of the reasons why, as soon as the decision was made with the previous contract, we didn't just go out and contract a firm and start recruiting, is because we're in a very volatile market. And I am involved with several listservs and boards across the country and globally. And what you typically see is if you create a position and hire someone to start sometime in the future, which this would be, to have a crossover of a couple of months in November and December, I'm hearing from people, even without a long wait, that they offer a job, and in a month from the start date, they're either ghosted at high levels by directors and other positions where they've used that time to leverage other positions or to retain a retention offer. And so there's a lot of volatility in saying, we've landed someone and they're going to start with us in 5 months. There's a lot that can happen in those 5 months. So for me, I guess that was one of the reasons, just so you know, I didn't feel it was appropriate to launch something at the beginning of the year. But certainly feel we have an aggressive timeline and we will need to adhere to it with all vigor.
Chair, may I say something in terms of that?
Yes, and I'm not completed with my line yet. Please.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, please.
No, if it's directly to that comment, please go ahead, because I have a couple more points I need to make.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Ms. Holmes, first I want you to know, as soon as the chair mentioned that you were on this already, it's sort of like Jerry Maguire. He had me at hello. I understood that. And the other thing is, it's really fascinating. We're in such uncharted waters. So what you just said makes eminent sense to me. I'm dealing with a personal attorney on a matter. Their entire practice was almost wiped out through COVID, early retirements, people moving to other places. So I just want to say thank you. I totally am sensitized to the environment that you're navigating. And thank you, Chair. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Certainly not an interruption. That was a supplement. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And so, Ms. Holmes, then back to the timeline. In order to meet the timeline, over the course of the next few weeks, some things are going to have to take place, and some of the things will have to take place while the board is in recess, more or less. We're down for 2 weeks after this. Typically, you would have a single board member who you'd rely on as a liaison to the balance of the board. Is that something you might prescribe in this situation, that maybe the board chair, which is me, be a liaison between you and the board, should you have questions that arise between now and the next time the board can get together?
Chair, thank you for the question. I do think it would be helpful for us to have a connection that we can communicate with, that the board is comfortable with, so that we can keep moving forward with all due haste. And also, agreeing that there will be touch points of significance to come back to the body as well.
Okay. Then let me try and wrap things up from my point of view a little bit. Then regarding the search firm, you have the go-ahead from the board to winnow it down from the firms that you already know and potentially see if there are any others out there that you've not looked at already. The reclassification, I think I would like to ask if you can give us some examples of what a reclassification would look like. And communicate that to us prior to actually making the posting. Now, the posting, you want to have that posted, let's see, by July, July and August, you'd like to have the posting and candidates sourced and screened. That's pretty aggressive. It would take quite a fast schedule between now and the end of July to get all of that in place. So how would you prescribe doing that to actually feel comfortable with a reclassification and have the posting ready to go online?
All right. So first of all, we have done a solicitation to recruitment firms on this. That's already gone out and come back, and we've had, as anticipated, because of the market, several recruitment firms declined. In the past, people would be, knocking over each other to try to do these recruitments, but they're all tapped. So we were pleased to get probably a handful of responses back. And fortunately, there are several that we're familiar with, and one that has been involved in several recent recruitments the last few years here. So we do have familiarity with some of these firms. Two other firms that we have utilized for at least one other recruitment the last couple of years. And so we're going, we haven't landed obviously on a firm pursuant to this discussion today, but we are going through scoring of those. Depending on the outcome, there are some firms that are much more familiar with us already and do not have to start from scratch as to the lay of the land of our organization, our culture, how we operate. And perhaps that's a consideration we should take into account as we screen them as well to be more nimble, who can provide us a quicker access and response. So that would be one component. As to the classification, on my end, when I was talking about, cleaning it up, here's a perfect example of when I looked at the classification. It's old. It's been sitting there for a long time. It still incorporates responsibilities to this role for the law library, for example. And that responsibility doesn't sit with that position anymore. It is someplace else. So I'd want to take out things that we already know are dated. And then if there was enough conversation today, if there were changes we needed to make with respect to the litigation continuing to be a component, not just for the classification, but more importantly for the job posting and how we assess the pay, we can work on that and certainly communicate out or set up time if there needs to be more discussion with the board as a whole, however we need to do that with you to get that done. But for the posting to go up, I've worked with, I don't know how many firms over the last 15 years. They will want that information. They're going to want to be able to talk to candidates about, hey, this seems like the perfect thing for you. Let me tell you why. Here's what they're looking for. Here's what it's going to entail. And here's the range, right? So those are things that they're going to need to launch those conversations. They might do some pre-recruiting even before then, just to start putting, feelers out, but to really engage and start locking people into envision and seeing themselves as possibly, strong candidates. Will need the rest of that information.
Good. That helps a lot, Ms. Holmes. I think let's look back to the timeline again. Then in order to get the posting ready to go online, what I propose based upon what we're talking about is that, today is today's the 15th of June. After next week, we'll not be back together until the 12th of July, which is a Tuesday. And do you think that you could take a look at the classification between now and the 12th of July? And we'd have to clear this with the agenda process, but so that to come back to us on the 12th of July with a suggestion as to what the posting might look like, so the board can take a look at that as a body. And some of the reclassification is going to be relatively simple. You just clean up the old language, and then what do we do regarding the nature of the position? Is it a litigant and manager? I think initially the posting should, this is my opinion on this, should be for a job that pretty much mirrors what Mr. Dingle does, that it's a litigant and manager position. And if that becomes an obstacle, then, or if there's room for discussion on that on the 12th, then we're going to address that at that point in time. But I think initially we should look to replace Mr. Dingle by somebody who performs the same duties as Mr. Dingle. And I would ask for that to come back by the 12th. Is that a reasonable time frame if this board asks you to do that?
Chair, it is, it's very reasonable from the perspective of that gives us more than enough time to do it. It makes me a little bit nervous that we're not going to land on a classification for posting for almost another month. You know, if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. But ideally, you know, and there's nothing we can do because the board is down. So absolutely, that's more than enough time for us to come back to you with those final pieces if we get the direction today on what the board would like for that role to look like.
Okay. Then a possible modification of that is that sometime between now and the 12th, you meet with a smaller cross-section of the board, maybe the officers and Mr. Mokrzycki, to take a look at what may be what you'd bring back on the 12th to see if there's any adjustment that needs to be made to that. Would that make you feel more comfortable that by the time we get to the 12th, you're going to be very close to being able to push the button on a posting?
Yes. And again, as far as the classification, I don't see that we'll need to do a lot of modification. Eliza is with me. Eliza, I don't have the class spec in front of me. If, for example, there was a decision made to carve out the litigation duties, do we really need to have substantive changes to that classification? It still is leading a boutique of what I call a specialized firm of attorneys. The litigation is just a definite, you know, add-on.
It would be removing a line item. So it would not be particularly challenging to do. It would just be the decision to do that or not do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kaczynski. Then that seems fairly cut and dried. With the one exception, we've not talked about salary range yet, and I would expect that you'd want that to be in the posting. So before we get a salary range, I think you've been saving that kind of for last. Maybe let's see if there's another round of discussion based on the conversation we've had already with the board. And Mr. Mokrzycki, actually, you've not weighed in on this yet. Can I ask you to give us your wisdom?
Yeah, Commissioner Trieger made this comment earlier that the county administrator position is very different than county counsel. That's true. But I do think there are some similarities. And I think the issue regarding litigation, I mean, I'll just give my experience coming in as the county administrator. When I started, I had 15 direct reports. It was clearly unmanageable. Risk management was one of the areas that reported directly to the county administrator. And I worked with county counsel and we moved that function over. So that one of the things that I think, inevitably any county counsel is going to be responsible for litigation, whether they're directly in a courtroom trying cases or they're contracting that out or they have a staff person doing that. So I think that we can work, and it sounds like with our HR staff, we can work with the existing classification and job description. And I think one of the questions that the board should be asking candidates is, how would you handle this, right? How would you handle, would you do litigation directly or would you do it differently? And it gives you the opportunity to weigh in. A couple other comments I just would make from the perspective of someone who it's been a while since I've been a candidate for a position, but we need to remember that while we, and I mean mostly really the 5 commissioners, are evaluating candidates for this position, candidates are also evaluating us as an organization and the 5 of you as bosses and me as a peer. They're evaluating us for the fit, for the culture of the organization, for the people they're going to work with. And Ms. Holmes indicated we have had really good success. I have great confidence because this is an incredible organization to work for. It's an incredible community to live in. So I have great confidence that we'll be able to land some good talent. It is a competitive pool that I'm sure we'll work with. I guess the only other, so I just want to make that comment about we need to be putting our best foot forward, right? And talking and we're also in the sales business of selling our organization and this place to work for two potential candidates. In terms of process, just something to think about. I mean, when I was a candidate, I was able to meet candidates that were running for office, and it was really helpful. There was actually an election that was still going on, sort of similar to what's happening now. I think that's helpful on some level, both for the candidates and for the organization, that there's that level of sort of openness and transparency that happens there, particularly when we're in a period of time that is somewhat transitional. Okay. So thank you for asking.
Thanks. And I'm going to ask you a quick follow-up on that, Ms. Mokrajewski. You know, as an executive, you came into what was a fairly stable board of county commissioners. That is to say, it wasn't changing in the near future. You know, we were kind of midterm on everything when you accepted the job. Is it a deterrent to somebody to know that they're being interviewed by somebody who's not going to be their boss? That their boss is going to be somebody different than the people who are interviewing them for the position? How does a candidate handle that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I wouldn't say, I mean, I would actually argue that the organization was in more transition and challenge at the time. You had two commissioners that were on the ballot like the week I started, I think, was the primary in May of 2014. So there were two contested races that were close. So that was I recall being a candidate at that time, and the individuals who were running for those offices participated in the meet and greet. I met both of those individuals. They sat in the audience for some of the interviews. I met with all five of the commissioners, of course. So it was not a foregone conclusion for me that I was going to work with the five sitting commissioners. I think their candidates are going to want to know that. But they're going to also look at, well, what's the staff that's in place? We have a really outstanding, talented staff in county council and in the other, in all of our other departments. So I heard a lot about this organization from other people. And then I came here and I met people and I realized these are really good people that are committed to the work, that realize there's some challenges ahead and they're committed to fixing those. So I have a great deal of confidence that, the work we do should transcend the politics of the moment. And that's what we should be looking for in a county council or county administrator, any of these positions, that you're looking for someone who's going to be able to do the work regardless of the sort of political winds that inevitably change over time. You want a professional that can run an office that's going to be trusted by the staff, that's going to give good counsel to the commissioners, regardless of who those commissioners are today or are in the future. So I think, yeah, hopefully that helps.
That goes beyond help. That eases my concern significantly, Ms. Mokrajewski, because one thing you pointed out is no matter who is the board today, 2 years from now, it's going to be different. 2 years from then, it's going to be different. There's always is an evolving board. So very good. Then let's go for further discussion. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you so much for that input. Very helpful. I want to start just by assuring Director Holmes that my comment about being behind the eight ball was in no way a criticism of your work or your professionalism or your understanding of what it takes to prepare for this moment that you're asking our input. That certainly work has gone in. I just meant that's just the nature of it. And exactly for the reason you mentioned, that you don't want to get too far out ahead of your skis and then lose a good candidate because the start date is too far away. So it's a balancing act. And I get that. It was really just a reflection of what I think is the reality and not a critique of any decisions made in your office. I still am curious the answer to the question about whether there might be a way to produce a posting that gets at a flexibility for the candidate who is either overseeing a chief litigator or is one themselves, if there is a way. And that might be something you have to talk with the recruiting firm for some guidance on as well. I don't want anything we do today to get in the way of moving forward as expediently as possible. So same with the comments about coming back to us on July 12th, if there's any way we can move this forward without waiting. until then. If there are decisions that have to be made by the full board, or the chair and vice chair and county administrator can be empowered to make some of these more sort of smaller operational tweaks to keep the process moving, I would very much like to hear that. The final thing is I'm reviewing the current contract for our county council, and 2 points. I think you mentioned, it does have an option for extension by mutual agreement. So if we need another, 2, 4, 6 weeks beyond this for transition, or however much that is something that can be negotiated. But more specifically, I'm noticing in item 1.3, the duties says throughout the term of his agreement, the county council will perform additional transition duties. So put a pin in that for a minute, but it says those duties include but are not limited to assisting with and providing feedback with respect to recruiting, hiring, and training new county council. So I don't know if he's already been engaged or to what extent in this process or where that would come in, but that's certainly a really important resource that we have here is our current council's help with the recruitment, hiring, and perhaps that's with how to word or proceed with a posting that gives us the maximum pool to choose from, whether it's someone with the litigation experience themselves or who will oversee someone in that function.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. And you kind of summarized what we've discussed already. And I guess if I may, at this point, before I get to Commissioner Bozievich, we're on a tight time frame. However, I think it sounds like we agree that the time frame that we're on is the one we'd like to stick to until it becomes evident that we can't stick to that time frame. Which means between now and July 12th, you'll work on a job classification, a job posting, and if need be, run it by a smaller cross-section of the board, which would potentially could be the officers and Mr. Mokrahajski, to get it ready for posting sometime around July 12th. That's kind of a summary of where we are up to this point in time. So let's discuss a little bit further. Commissioner Bozievich. Mr. Mokrahajski, did you have something to add?
And I want to be clear. My role in this issue is to help provide support. So Ms. Holmes is really working for the board here, because this is your position that you're recruiting for. So I'm here just to help support Ms. Holmes and the board in whatever way that you would like me to be involved. And if I'm speaking out of turn here, Alana, you please correct me. But I've not heard anything regarding the question about litigation that would preclude us from moving forward with posting before July 12th. I don't believe, again, you can stop me if you think I'm wrong, Alana, but I think we can move forward if the board is okay with posting. This issue around, are you hiring someone who can do litigation and general counsel? Or are you splitting that? That can get resolved, I think, through the recruitment process with the recruiters, with the candidates, through the interview process. So I wouldn't allow that, in my opinion, to hold you up from just moving forward and getting the recruitment firm hired and posting the position if that's what you want to do. 2, I've heard that you may desire to have a couple of commissioners, maybe it's the chair and the vice chair, be sort of, work with the director of HR and the county administrator on moving some of these things forward. Let's just make sure we get head nods from the board today that that's what they want to do, so that you have the ability to, whoever it is has the ability to do that. The third thing I just want to mention, I didn't mention previously, was because we did talk about, the process and sort of engagement of different stakeholders or individuals. Really important that we engage, we find the right way. And you don't have to decide this today. I just want to put it on there on the table. The county council staff. There obviously will be different key partners within the organization engaged, but particularly the staff, because, understand that anytime a new leader, when you were hiring a county administrator, you can be sure that all the county administration staff was very anxious to see who were the candidates and who was going to get hired, and that impacts individuals that work for this person. So the really direct and robust engagement of the talented staff and county council is going to be important in that process.
Thank you, Ms. Mokrahajski. So you're suggesting that the posting could occur between now and July 12th, that any cleanup of the classification doesn't necessarily have to be a part of the posting, and that the small things that you mentioned, Ms. Holmes, such as the law library, which is a pretty tiny thing, that's all almost clerical in nature. Okay, let's move forward to Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I'll start with, being nimble. I have no problems with the chair and vice chair working with HR to get this process going and during our downtimes and whatever else. I don't remember us coming back to the full board as we were arranging whether or not we were going to have a meet and greet for the county administrator candidates. I believe you were chair at the time, weren't you?
I think
and I believe you
accepted the job to me.
Yeah. And I believe that you worked directly with either Madeline or Howard. I can't remember which one was HR director at the time.
It was Madeline initially. Yeah.
And the board basically delegated authority to you to set the process up to a certain degree. I have, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So I have confidence in your ability to set up the process in the interim and not have to come back to the board for minor decisions and things like that. So
and Commissioner Bozievich, then as now, we had very competent staff that was actually really doing the work, and I just kind of
you kind of they still need to come to somebody and say you okay, and there has to be nimble. There has to be somebody that says it's okay, go ahead, and that's where I was getting at. Just to get back to input, et cetera, and candidates being involved. I'm looking, part of my desire for that was watching 4J's process in hiring a superintendent and the difficulty they've had because they have, this board that's not in agreement and everything else. And I was thinking, if I'm an outside candidate for a position being hired by this board, and I know that usually my first 6 months to a year is at will, and I'm going to have a different set of bosses in 2 months. I want to know who those bosses are, or at least potentially might be, as I'm making that. The same thing about not trying to put the position out too early. We can get a no just because somebody's concerned that, I'm being hired by 5 people, and that's not going to be the 5 people that are my boss. And that might change after the first of the year while I'm at will, and I might be gone, type thing. So having some confidence around that and being able to meet the potential bosses, that's why I included all the candidates that, because we can't predict the outcome of elections. And that was, part of my desire in having that is that as we're trying to recruit, I don't want to get in a 4J situation where a candidate feels uncomfortable because they're not sure what the future with that board will be as their boss, and the culture there. So that's part of that desire to have that input. I do agree with a lot of the other, it's great for them to meet union leadership of all 8 of our unions now, and to particularly meet with current staff and have the staff, see the candidates and them to see who their staff is, who they're inheriting for staff. Because this is going to be a difficult position to recruit for, and we should try in every way to make it easy for somebody to say yes. And presenting a unified board to a candidate that's going to, this is going to be a career move for them, and they're going to be here for several years. They can settle their family, whatever else they need to do. And that's really what I was looking for was, you've been a candidate and you said it was great to meet candidates and have that viewpoint. So that's one of the reasons why I brought that issue in, not just the fact that I won't be here to be their boss, so to speak, but just part of just making sure we don't go down the road of 4J and have several aborted attempts at making this hire, because we really got one shot at this right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? I think we're starting to hone in right now. I see Commissioner Bernie's hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to also echo complete confidence in you and Vice Chair Trieger to be that point of contact. So I don't know if we need a formal vote, but I think you got at least four approving that already. I also want to say that Commissioner Bozovich, I don't disagree with you. You started last time by saying this is controversial, but actually the way Administrator Mokrahysky stated it, it's not controversial at all. I really heard it from his perspective and it makes complete sense to me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then Ms. Holmes, without anybody else saying anything, what have you heard? What do you think we've told you to do?
This is a good check. Yes to moving forward with selecting a recruiting firm and getting that contract in place as soon as possible. That it sounds like there's general agreement to look at having the chair and vice chair along with our county administrator, Mokrahysky, being our touch points, for example, to any updates for the classification and job posting so that we don't have to hold up and wait for July board meeting. So we can move forward with that, with those connections. And yes, to the general timeline that's proposed, hoping that we'll be able to hit all the marks there. And on the salary range, I don't know that I've heard much or seen thumbs up on the salary range, which again, based on the work of Liza, she determined a competitive salary range for the county council would be $165,000 to $210,000, plus the benefits that we know come with that position. So it would be helpful to know if there are concerns with that. And if there aren't, and that's something we can move forward with, then I would look to be directed to just bring back that information in a future consent calendar item board order, just to have the documentation to reflect the decision made today.
That's 165 to 210. Just refreshes, what is the county administrator's salary range?
Ooh, off the top of my head, well, to say the range, I should have had that pulled up.
And I should have cued you with a question long before now. So.
No problems. I should be able to get to that.
And the reason that I ask that is because we have somewhat of an equity issue. You know, we talked about compaction, contraction. We talk about that fairly frequently as we adjust salary ranges. So, you know, when the basketball coaches and football coaches get hired at the University of Oregon, they talk about, well, what's the other coach making? So just to put it into perspective.
And so with that, I would also say, you know, we are fortunate in that we do have a process where we look at the comparables for those kinds of positions. So for the county administrator, we look at comparables from our 5 counties to what the county administrator is paid. Eliza did the same process that we utilize in our organization and looking at what the county councils in the 5 counties that we compare with, what those salaries were. So currently, if I go back to the county administrator and look at the salary range there, because you've given me enough time to get that, if I can scroll down quickly enough. The county administrator, the range is from $156,000 and some change to $234,000. So that's the range there, 156 to 234. And what we're doing with the county council range is we're lifting up that lower end because traditionally there are positions at the county where we see our beginning steps are lower than the rest of the market. So where the county administrator starts at 156, the county council would start at 165. So starting on the higher end, and where county administrator caps out currently at 234,000, this would be at 210,000. And again, those ranges are based on the markets that have been done most recently for the county administrator just a couple of months ago, and as of this past week with our class comp analyst for this position.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. That seems like a very comfortable overlap to me. So then what you've said so far, the board overheard what you just said. Any discussion regarding what Ms. Holmes thinks we're telling her to do?
Surprised it's that low, to be honest.
On the salary?
Yep. So I have no problems. I would say I would, once we have a recruiting firm on board, we need to reconfirm that salary range, maybe with them also. Because
Very
our
good.
5 comparators aren't the market we're recruiting from.
So then let's reiterate, and I think I agree with Commissioner Bozich on that. So for now, the salary range that you have stated, 165 to 210, let's move forward with that. Let's move forward with, based on what you're saying, get the contract in place with the search firm and get the posting in place sometime before July 10th with the liaison with the board officers should it be necessary. And that the timeline as you proposed it, let's keep it intact as is for the time being, keeping a close eye on it as the dynamics affect the process. And anything else, Ms. Holmes, that you need?
I am looking this over. I think I have answers to each of the questions that I posed, and we will go forth and move forward as soon as we can. And as soon as we get a firm, we will start the conversations with a sense of urgency. And if there are, based on discussions with them, if there are any changes, I'll be sure to communicate that through the chair and the vice chair for broader dissemination.
Excellent. Mr. Mokrowski, I'll look to you to interpret what's been said. Is it all very clear to you also?
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Because your staff will be writing it down for for the minutes at least. So very good. Then Ms. Holmes, anything else you need from us today?
Not today. I look forward to working with you all on this critical role and appreciate your time and feedback.
Well, thank you for all the work that you've done so far. We all acknowledge that that this isn't the start of the process. We're well along the way on the process right now, and I, for one, am comfortable that we're in a good spot to potentially meet the timeline. Now, we could get curves thrown at us when we look at the candidate field, and if we offer a job to somebody from Memphis and they say, "Are you kidding me? Move my family across the country for to live in a place I don't even." Well, anyway, fill in the blanks. So. Then with that to the board, I think we've given Ms. Holmes all the information that she needs and we're ready to move forward.
Thank you.
Next time we see you, we'll be on probably July 12th, but we'll have liaison in the meantime.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners.
Thank you. And Ms. Mokrowski, thank you. Then let's move along with the agenda. We're moving on to item 7A, which is Commissioner Business. Any announcements from the board? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to make sure people are aware that I will not be here next week. I am finally taking a cruise that was originally booked for my wife's 60th birthday, but is now instead being utilized to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary due to COVID. But we put deposits down prior to COVID, and we'll lose our deposits if we don't use the cruise. So I will not be here all next week. And because it's in the Alaska Inside Straits, I don't know if I'll be able to get virtual connectivity at all. So I'll be back the following week and available that ways. And I should be able to, when we're in port, check email, but that's about it. So just want to make people aware of that absence.
Thank you. Then you'll be excused from the next board meeting. Further announcements? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. It just occurred to me when we were hearing from the sheriff earlier and about the contract with WellPath that there was some discussion about the Behavioral Health Stabilization Center. So I just want to make sure anyone from the public that's watching knows there's a whole section on our website devoted to that project where people can learn about what is now 6 years in the making, this project, and where it is now. And specifically this Thursday, right on the front of our homepage of lanecounty.org in the news update section, there's information on how you can register for a Zoom webinar, an informational panel on the discussion on the project of our proposed Behavioral Health Stabilization Center. So just encouraging anyone who's watching to plug into that project and learn more about it on our website. And if you hear this in time and are available at 11 this Thursday to register to watch that panel discussion. It's a very exciting project. It's a much needed project. And not only, as we heard from the sheriff today, would it alleviate a lot of strain on our jail and law enforcement and criminal justice system. You'll also hear on the panel from folks with Peace Health about the impacts on emergency room utilization and healthcare access, basically how we're using our ER and our jails as a de facto holding place for folks with mental illness and substance use disorder and really not giving them the humane treatment they deserve, and that's better for the community. So really just encouraging anyone to get as involved as they want to be, or at least review the materials on that website about that project. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trigger. Commissioner Buck.
I have one invitation to anybody who's listening that wants to come. The VITA Community Center is having their ground breaking event. It's pretty exciting for one of our first big community centers and facilities to be built. It is this Friday at 11 a.m. at 90377 Thompson Lane in VITA, Oregon, and everybody is welcome.
Outstanding. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burney. Oh, your hand's not raised. So right, don't call on you when it is, and I call on you. Very good. Then I have no announcements myself other than that the outreach session that takes place tomorrow, I believe that is.
That's right. Tomorrow's Thursday. It's Tuesday on a Wednesday here. I'm all confused.
So it's on June 16th, and there will probably be further outreach sessions during the month of July. So if you can't make the one tomorrow, there'll probably be another opportunity. So with that, we'll move along to any future board assignment requests. I see none. Then Ms. Mokrasky, do you have a review of assignments?
I think I would just recap the one that you gave head nods on to support having the chair and vice chair work with the HR director and county administrator on the recruitment process for county council. So I'll talk to Ms. Jones about that, but since I'm not sure that's on our strategic plan and I don't think it's been identified anywhere else, it might be nice to have that as an assignment that that can be tracked.
Thank you, Ms. Mokrasky. And then along those lines, you'd mentioned the outreach when it comes time to begin vetting candidates, that it would involve staff, particularly the council staff. And that's all to be determined as we move forward from this point in time. So that's not a current assignment. Any comments or questions on the review of assignments? We've already completed today and this week's executive sessions, which means there's only one more thing to do. That is adjourn this meeting. We are adjourned.